That's very colorful. My password, oh yeah, it's password.
How's the cure?
Well, I mean, it's the same one as I mean, you could do it on your virtual machine if you want. And I said I show you the create a new user if you want. So I'm just going to look real quickly at, let me bring SQL. And I might go in and change the display if it's wrong, which I think it maybe will be. Come on. Didn't I start the SQL server there? There it goes.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to change things in just a little bit once it connects. I'm going to go change the display. If it me. Ah, shoot. Don't you love all this messing around just to get going? Yeah, I do like the fish. I've seen that one before. Okay, I think it worked. Now I have to restart SQL Server though. And I will not do that because if I restart again, it just goes away. So I'm going to do connect and we'll get going. So do you guys have any query or questions about joins or all of that? Some of you have started the SubQueries. That's what I'm going to cover today. But do you have any questions about the other joins and things before? Yeah, you did a lot of, you have to set the left and right joins and that.
Yeah, I think I was just playing around with that line.
So when there's no difference, the effect is the same. That's why I say your answers were the same, but this was a weird sequence.
I think I was just trying to figure it out, but
Okay.
I'll make sure that I didn't miss
Okay. So we'll do this with Community Assist. It'll do subqueries. So subqueries, to some extent, they're doing things that joins could do, just a different syntax. Sometimes, you really do run the. I'm not sure. Sometimes they're a little bit more efficient than the joins. Although SQL Server has an optimization engine that's really hard to optimize it. It's possible, but it's hard to do.
I have a question about that. You can't sort of stack on the some very knowledgeable SQL person was showing how different ways of doing a query produce the same plan. He had an image of how it was processed by the SQL logic.
Sure. Let's do a real quick one where I'll just do a quick join and I'll show you how to get that image.
Cool.
All right. So can you see the toolbar up here? There's a thing up here that says display estimated execution plan. And there's one that says, I want the actual. Include actual plan. So I'm going to click that. And then I'm going to also include client statistics. So let's just do use community assist, which will run some queries, but I don't want to see this. Actually, let me turn off the statistics for a moment. Oh, well, let me turn them off. Oh, results to grid, results to text, that's fine. Statistics is what I wanted to turn off for a minute because it will include the use, which I don't really want. And then I'll turn on the statistics again. And I'll just do it real quick. Select. Oh, so let's the person last name. So I'm going to do like hire date, position name, into this position. And I'm going to do like some inner joins here for this. This is, so we'll do from person, inner join employee. I need to see the tables here. Position, and we've got employee position. Inner join employee on p dot person key equals e dot person key. Inner join, is it employee position? Yep. On e dot employee key equals ep dot employee key.
You only got the.
Oh yeah, ep. And then we need to interjoin with position. I always do the inner, as I said, they're not. There isn't requirements or inner joins by default. On alien. Can't do. All right. So I have this. Oh, and hire date. Is it employee hire date? Okay. So I'm going to just run this query, which has all these inner joins. And it gives me that. But we also have a couple of tabs here. And this is probably what you saw. So I'll do the execution plan. Let me this.
Statistics?
This is the execution plan. Is this kind of what you're looking at? So it tells you, there was a nested loop, inner join, nested loops with inner join. It gives you what the cost is, how much of the total time did this part of the process take. If you are troubleshooting, what you want to do is find the part that has the most, gives you the most problems, right? And you make some change. There's no index on this, but actually, if I were to, I could show you indexes, and we would do that as some. It's actually no, it's like a simple, but it use indexes help speed up. They don't have a data community assist. Reason being that there aren't enough records in community assist to ever spawn. When you're, I forget what it is, some thousands of records. because it's faster for the computer just to go through them one by one than it is to create the index up until a certain threshold. Indexes in Metro also would have an effect because there are enough records in there. So the other thing is you can put your cursor over any of these, and it gives you essentially what's in the index. So it gives you all of the different costs of each operation associated with this clustered index. And the clustered index is the index on the primary key. Every time you make a primary key, it creates a clustered index unless you tell it specifically not to. So, and you can only have one clustered index per table, because what the clustered index is it physically orders the rows. Right, so they're physically ordered by the primary key. You can only have one physical order per table. Other indexes, non-clustered indexes, create a binary tree. Right, they actually create a separate structure, a binary tree, where so that you can say if it's between this and this, go this way. If it's between this and this, go to this node. So what it does is instead of having to go through, say, 10,000 records, you may only have to go through a dozen records because it branches at every choice. And so you only have to hit the ones that are relevant. And it's much faster than going through all the records and finding it. But it has the cost of it has to actually generate the binary tree and distribute the data among them. So the statistics gives you the cost again per different things, packets. The trouble is this is all fairly sophisticated and it's fairly low level, machine level kinds of things. And our computers, because we're running things locally, because we don't have a lot of data, the entire cost of this was 10 milliseconds. So you don't see a lot. But notice that there's a trial. You can keep rearranging the query, and you can run it multiple times, and it'll keep track of the differences. And it will also tell you if they're the same or less or greater than. It gives you an up arrow or down arrow or a cross. And you can, you know, you can actually spend some time here trying to optimize a query. Again, there are optimization engines built into SQL Server that are actually quite good. So it's a fairly rare thing where you can out-optimize it, but it does happen sometimes. So that's not relevant to the assignment, but it's interesting.
It was an interesting way to evaluate efficiency in different ways.
Yeah, you could. So one of the things to do, although this query would be really hard to do as a subquery. So a lot of things work better as joins. Subqueries, I mean, you could compare. There are a couple of things we could try looking at the join and looking at the subquery and seeing if one is better than the other, if you really want at some point. But so if you want to see all this kind of stuff, it's just, I mean, it's as easy as turning on these things to present the statistics and the plan. There's also an estimated plan, which is what it thinks it's going to do, and you can compare that compared to what it actually did, you know, which is also sometimes sort of interesting. And not that it matters right now, but there is a tuning advisor tool built into. And one of the things that the tuning advisor will do is it will let you say, I want to check these tables, and it'll come back and say, you should have these indexes. So it suggests indexes where it thinks that they would be useful. Does that make sense? So
Again, that would only be helpful for large.
it's yeah. So if we did it on Community Assist, I know this because I've done it. It wouldn't suggest anything because there's not enough data for it to But it does suggest on the Metro Alt, it does suggest several indexes actually. So the profiler is kind of a neat tool too. It lets you see what's happening in the server real time. So if you were an administrator, you could watch, basically you could watch things scroll by as people are making queries and doing, and you can choose, there's like about 90 different things you can choose to watch. So it would get a screen in the movies, things just scrolling up and down.
Love that.
Yeah. So, and it does have some tools in the profiler too to let you do things like kill processes. So if you see a lock that isn't being released, you can kill it and things like that.
Deadlock the database.
The deadlock, yeah. And you can record it all so that you don't have to watch it if you don't want to watch it in real time. So you can basically create a script to come back and watch it later. You know, so that you only have to really watch it if you want to locate a problem or something. All of that said, that's stuff I cover in the summer classes, in the admin classes. Let's go back to subqueries. And I'll do the results again. Okay. So subqueries are, like they say, they're queries that are embedded in other queries. They're complete queries in themselves. They can be in the select, they can be in the where clause, they can even be, although we'll cover this more later, in the from clause. So, you know, when you're selecting from something, normally you select from a table, but you could create a subquery, so you're selecting from a result set rather than from an actual table. Does that make sense? I don't think we have any of those for this, but there are some Windows functions, they call them, and things where we'll be doing that, which have that kind of, where you have subqueries in the from clause as well. So let's do a real simple one. No, I'm not going to restart. Okay, so it's outside of active hours, so better. I just need to check this so it doesn't restart in the middle of this. 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. active hours, okay. As long as it stays with that. All right, so let's do a simple one. Let's do, first we'll do this as a select max donation amount. Oh, from donation. Now we can do this, we've done this before, right? But what if you wanted to know which donation or who did the donation? How would you do that? Because if you put in another field here, you have to group by, right? And if you group by, then you're going to get you probably just won't anything. Let's do like that's its owner key. Whoa, okay. Okay. Oh, and then I have to group by donor key. It's donation key. So is, I think, every single donation, right? Because each of these is the max for that donor. So if you wanted to know who gave, I mean, there are things you could do, like you could sort and put it on top, I suppose. But if you wanted to see who did this, without sorting, you could do select, let's do donation key, donation date. What else would we want to see? Person key. We could look that up. I could do an inner join here if I wanted, but I just want to show that. So I'm going to do from donation. And I'm going to do where donation amount. Oh, let's do the donation amount up here too. Where donation amount is equal to select max donation amount from donation. So this is the subquery in the where clause. Things about doing a subquery in the where clause. If you use it, this sub will not return in a single value. It'll give you errors. It's going to return more than a single value. Max aggregates, if they're just on the table themselves, will just a single. I'm going to return value. What did I? Person key. Sorry. Typing and talking are not my fortes today. So we have, it was donation 39. This is the date for it. The person was 78 and the amount was 12,150. So this is one of the things you can do. Does that make sense? That's a fairly easy use of it. There's no easy way to with a join. I'm going to do basically the same thing as an outer join. And again, sometimes this is, you might consider this to be easier with a subquery. So we had the thing like select grant type, right? So I'm going to do type name from grant type, where, all right, grant, wish I could type, grant type key, and I'm going to do a not in, and I'm going to do select grant type key grant request.
So people get requests, get given the money.
No, we're actually looking for what grants types has nobody ever asked.
Oh, okay.
So it's like an outer join, right? Except we're doing a set function, not in. You can also do in. I'll do in a minute. Where, so if I do execute there, it shows funerary and holiday for asked types of events. So it's an outer. It's like it has the same effect as an outer join, except it might be easier. Does that make sense? We could also do, it's other things about the clause or the volume. It's really important that you're looking for the same thing on both sides here. You're looking, it would work if I did a person key and grant type key. I'll just show you. The results would be meaningless. Yeah, let's keep that one. Because they're both integer types, see, we get lots of different child names, but what all that means is that they're all, I mean, we're comparing apples. Oops, I'm sorry. We're comparing apples and oranges. They don't have anything to do with each other, right? So in an answer is. Does that make sense? This needs to be the same as the other. Well, I should leave that and just put a comment about it. Okay, it looks wrong, but I'll leave it. Yeah, I think it looks wrong. All right, I'm going to do one with N. You want it as an employee. You could do this with an inner join, but I'm going to do select, say person last name, person first name. That's probably good enough. Well, it's an email. From person. Boy, typing is not my thing today. Where person key in select star, no, select person key from employee. The advantage in, by the way, not always an advantage, but it's looking for, all it's doing is it's looking for this complete subset that's returned by the subquery, and it's saying if there's a match in it, right? So this one can return multiple values. And what we'll do here is we'll see that we get the names of all the employees, which I think that's all of them right there. Yeah. If the person key is in there, we'll return them. It's looking for only those persons who have their key in the employee. This is one of those. I'm just curious. I'm going to do it as an inner join. We could compare the two. So let's do person key. So I'm going to turn off the statistics for a moment. And then I'll just run this, and then I'll turn the statistics back on. I just don't want all my former statistics in there. So now what I'll do is I'll turn on the plan, and I'll turn on the client statistics, and I'll run this as a subquery. So we get the execution plan. And the total time, whoa, it's got all the trials. I thought I'd turn that off. I didn't want all of them. There'd be a way to clear that. Oh well, this isn't that relevant anyway. Okay, now if I include this, let's look at all my trials. I'll have to figure out how to clear the old trials. I was just curious which one would be faster. But I'll have to figure out how to. So these two do exactly the same thing. Which one is better? Probably doesn't matter. It's up to you. Yeah.
I lost my connection to the server and it not come back up.
Was it all down the whole time? Or was it not?
I just went down and I tried to restart it.
All right, so let's do a couple more subqueries. I'm going to chain one here, and then I'll do some queries in the select. Trying to think about what I want to put in. So let's do select person first name. Person last name. And we want to know which employee reviewed some grants. So I'm going to do from person where person key in and then select person key. Why is it not liking that?
Key isn't capitalized.
That doesn't matter.
You have person first.
Oh, person first. Person key from employee. Okay, and then I'm going to say, and then where. So I'm going to do a where employee key in. So let's in grant review. Is there a employee key?
Before the second where.
No, because it's in a separate query. In employee key and grant review key are in grant review. And then what would I want? Maybe one more where let's say grant. I'm just going to do this. Grant status equals denied is the correct. We'll have to see about that. Need this. Grant review. What the
Does it have another?
Oh, we're in grant, and then I need. So what we do is so we're doing get that where this in where a key and then select employee from grant review where files would and then the this is kind of down just like for the we're looking for which pieces we're looking at are in those employees and they've done that stuff or do not. Does that make sense? Just the same as a joint follows down. It should so be employees who have denied the grants on review. One of the problems with the subquery here is that I really can't bring anything back from employee or from grant review because of the way it's changing down through there. I can only see fields from the first table that I did. I could see you could get there, but join might actually be a bit more flexible. But I just wanted to show you. And then we're going to do a couple queries in the, do a really complicated one, but we'll do it in stages with the subqueries and the select clause. All of these have been in the where. Does this all make sense? You guys okay? I feel a little discombobulated. If I don't make sense, let me know.
Mine's not finding grant review status.
Grant request status. That work? A couple of things. Let's say we wanted to see going to do a select. Oh, like some donation amount. Now let's do some grant request amount. All right. I'm going to call it a subtotal. This up as I bit by bit. So I'm going to do this from grant request. And I think I also want grant type name, which means we need to do an join. I'm going to alias this as GRGT. So on gr dot grant request grant type key equals gt dot grant type key. So we'll do this one first, and then, as I said, we're going to expand on it with some subqueries. Oh, and then you need group by grant type name. So when I run that, it'll give me the total for each grant type, right? That's the total, and I called it subtotal. That's the subtotal in there. What if you wanted to see it compared to the grand total? So we could do, I'm going to just do a comma here, and I'm going to do a subquery that says select sum, and we'll do grant request amount. From grant request. I'm going to close that with the parentheses. Subqueries always have parentheses. And I'll do this as total. So when I run that, I get the subtotal. These all have the same number because it's the grand total, right? The way you can get the subquery allows you to put the total in along with the grouped by total. Okay, why would you do that? You might want it like a percent. So we could do, I'm going to add one more column here. So I'm going to do sum grant request divided by, and what we'll do is we'll actually use the subquery. We'll divide it by the subquery. Oops, got an extra paren. Okay, and then I'll say as percent, and we can now what is it not like? Oh, percent is a keyword. Some grant request. Should be okay with that. Oh, grant request amount. So the percentage there, and if we wanted to format this, we could add a formatting code to all of that. And I could multiply it by 100 if I wanted. So if I wanted to I don't know if you really want me to do this. Oops, got my caps lock, although actually that would be there. Same. In quotes. What is it not like? What am I doing that's wrong? when you do the format, do you have a comma here, right?
Yeah.
So what am I doing wrong?
I have a space between the one of the.
But that shouldn't matter for this. What is it not like? Do I have a paren?
Yeah, we're in on line 43, missing that. No, you don't. I'm sorry, I got it wrong.
That's okay. One grant request subtotal. That should be okay. I shouldn't have made all the format. Yeah, I mean, I don't see any parens missing. Comma, comma, comma. You know what, I probably, I didn't do it. I wanted to put the whole equation in a, that doesn't seem to matter. You guys are working? I've done this before, made it work. What is missing? Let's run it and see if it gives me an error. Incorrect syntax near the word select. For which one? Oh, you know, that does need another. There we go. I was missing an opening one. So notice it formatted everything fairly nicely. I have a kind of a report. Each one has the you know, the subtotal for that type, and then it has the grand total, and it has what percent of that grand total each type is. Does that make sense? The thing is that there is no way to do this kind of a report without subqueries. Well, actually, that isn't true. There's a Windows function, so we'll look at those later. But in general, this is how you do. This is the one that I said was hard. You know, basically where you go in and you have to use subqueries and subqueries in the math. Does that make sense, or is it totally confusing? So if we talk through it, this is a you know, which means row by row grant time, and then we have a sum. Because not in subqueries, this is just a sum. We have to group by the grant type name, right? So it's going to give you the total per grant type. But when you do a subquery, you don't have to group by the results. So we have a subquery where we get some of the grant request amount from grant request. Because it's a subquery, it gives you the total, right? It gives you the end total. Is grouped by amount, the grouped by amount equation. So I use the subquery in the equation. So when you do a percent, you always do the part by the whole. Divide the part by the whole. This is the part. It's the part that's grouped by. This is the whole grouped by. So we're dividing the subquery. Yeah. But,
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I've got some syntax down.
okay. I'm trying to think, is there anything else in the assignment that I didn't cover for subqueries? I could look at the assignment, I guess, and see. I had last year's one up here, but I didn't look at it, so I don't know. Oh, you know, there is one thing I should show you. One more thing. Called a correlated subquery. Anybody heard of those?
Yeah.
So a correlated subquery is where the subquery is dependent on the outer query. So they're very much equivalent to recursive functions. And they have the advantages and disadvantages of recursive functions. Yeah, it creates a loop which and so they're not very efficient.
You have to specify a termination.
You don't, although they probably do it on the inner C++ code. So I am going to do, this is just a, I'm going to do one just sort of to build up to the why you would do this. I'm going to do, I'm not going to do, I could do it, is it service key? It's actually, it's like grant request type key, right? What is the key for, it's grant type key. And then I'm going to do average, actually. Yeah, all right. Just trying to think of why I was doing this in there. Not sure we need this. So that gives us the grant type. I think I did this just to see what the different things were so that I have a value, and I think it's just in there. What if you wanted to compare, you wanted grant allocations, I'm trying to think about this, where you want to see where the average grant allocation is above a certain amount, but you don't want to compare apples to oranges because the different kinds of grants have different, like rent is a much bigger grant in general than food is. Does that make sense? So you don't want to compare rents to foods when you're comparing average, you know, which averages are greater than the average, maybe? Which grants are bigger than the average grant? Does that make sense?
Within the same common type.
Right. So you want to compare type to type. You want to compare rent to rent. You want to compare food to food, etc. And you're looking for things that are greater than the average grant, right? So these are the averages. That's why I did this, I think. The way you have to do this is with a correlated subquery, and I'm not sure I ever explained these very well. I'm going to try to explain it. I will say that if you ever get a job interview with database, they tend to show you, one of the things they ask you to do is often a correlated subquery because they're fairly rare and they're complicated, and if you figure that you can do it, then then you probably know SQL, okay. So I'm going to show one, and then we'll try to talk through it.
So the example that you just gave.
So what I did just now is just for reference. So the average grant for type grant 1 is 128, and I think the first type is food. If you want, we could, I don't know if I want to do an inner join in here to complicate things more, although we could after we're done. But we'd have to do an inner join to get the type. set up. But let's just do it without the inner join for now. I'm going to do basically, I'm going to do select grant type key and grant type amount, or grant request amount. And I'm going to do this from service grant, not service grant, grant request. One of the things that's confusing me here when I'm looking at my example is I've changed the names of the fields since then. So from grant request, and I'm going to call this, this is the time when aliasing is absolutely required. I'm going to call it GR1. Okay. And then I'm going to say where grant allocation, or grant request amount, again, different names, is greater than, and then we're going to start a subquery. Select average grant request amount from grant request GR2, so I alias it, where GR1 dot grant request type key, or grant type key, is equal to GR2 dot grant type key. Does that make sense? So what we're saying is we want to see which ones are bigger than the average request, but only when the grant type in the second query is equal to the grant type in the outer query. So it's called a coordinated because, again, the inner query here is dependent on the outer query. It's comparing values between the two. And again, the effect of this is like a recursive function. Have you guys ever done recursive functions programming? Basically it's a function that calls itself.
So what's the plan look like for one of those?
I don't know, we could look.
Does it show somehow that you're going to be having to execute that line?
But we can look in a minute. Let's see if it works first. So it says that these three grants for one are greater than the average. And then let's see if that's true. So I'm going to run this again. And then I'll run the other and we'll look at that. So the average for one is 128, right? So when we run this, the average for one is, this is slightly bigger. This is only a few cents bigger, but the others are quite a bit bigger. The average for type 2 is 658, and I'm pretty sure that's rent. If we run this one, the average, the ones for type 2 are like there's 1,200, 850, 800. They're all bigger than the 650. So it's doing this, but it's only comparing. It's not comparing apples and oranges. It's comparing like to like. Let's look at the execution plan for this. So it has quite a few components. Nested loops, 4%. Table spool, lazy spool, not entirely sure what that means. Segment, sort, clustered index, nested loops, compute scalar, table spool, stream aggregate, table spool. I wonder what table spool is. I'd have to look that term up. The total cost, That's, I guess if I go to client, but it would be the very last one. Yeah, the total cost was 11 milliseconds. But again, we don't have a lot of data. One of the things that they will tell you about correlated subqueries is that if there's any way to avoid them, you should. All right, there are some kinds of questions where really this is the optimum way to answer them, but if you can avoid, you should, because of the processing costs. It's also true in programming. Recursive functions are very expensive to process it. All right, that was the last thing I needed to show you. Does your book stuff on this, but basically the essence of a correlated subquery.
So you can't.
Run them. If I were to, guess it would know what grant type one. So it requires query. And the only times I can see the really is when you aim to sure you're comparing two they're the same. It's usually what it's a correlation. I think that's it. Is there any slide? Oh, just like with doing vocabulary, the subquery there that would be the rest of the course. It's not a one-off in terms of like. I mean, and these, I mean, the whole in a data down information the table themselves typically are not useful. They're just the data. How the data stuff that not useful is aggregation of the data, figuring out average total and count the things. Yeah.
Is there any tools with the management that you can display it visually?
What, the query?
Or like if you are just like data and stuff, if you wanted to.
You mean display the query structure, basically? What are you thinking about?
Like the results, like if for like a different program.
Oh, I bet you could. You mean like mapping it, or?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm sure it would only work with numbers and stuff that had.
right. See, there's a SQL Server, a whole set of reports.
Yeah.
The reporting tool do have like and charting tools. Also, if you like mapping tools, so you can make one of those. Have those bigger, different sizes. And actually, the
Is that?
results I do into database programming. It was a long time ago. It was data programming. I knew how to program some databases. Over the talking to people at the school, that is reporting tools, right? So taking this and graphing it and making nice, neat-looking reports. And they also needed to know how to import and export material. And it can be quite complex, importing and exporting. You know, it's simple if you're just exporting a table, but if you have to bring in like a spreadsheet and you've got, spreadsheets are almost never well normalized, so you have to take all the data and redistribute it.
Yeah.
You know, that can be fairly complex, particularly if it's something you have to do over and over again, which is not atypical, because there may be a spreadsheet that's generated somewhere that you have to import
So
regularly.
you can automate it.
Yeah, you can automate all of that kind of stuff. So I show some of that. And then I also show a little bit of data warehousing and data
So
analysis
is
stuff.
that required for the database?
That's required for the database. And unfortunately, it's only in the summer.
And 226 too.
What are the
Yeah.
prereqs?
What's 226?
This is the prereq, basically.
226 is
admin.
admin.
So the 226 is more about, well, we do things like we were looking at today where we do some optimization.
Looking at
And indexes,
index uses,
index use, optimization, backup and restore.
finding deadlocks.
Yeah, to some extent, yeah. I do, actually they've replaced, the profiler is still there, but they've got a new tool, so we look at that. We look at some of the tools you have for managing the database and also how to automate things. So there's all sorts of tools to automate the processes that you need to do so that you don't have to pay attention all the time. So it's mostly, you know, setting up. I've been debating though, changing that a little bit so that it's not all SQL Server. Do a little bit of MySQL and maybe even a little bit of NoSQL in there to get, you know, in terms of the other thing, big thing is security. Setting up users, setting up logins, setting up permissions, setting up roles. SQL Server also has schema, which is a way overused word in database. On one hand, it means the structure of things, and on the other hand, schema is a ownership of objects in SQL Server. They actually use the same words in Oracle and MySQL, but they handle schema differently than SQL Server does. In Oracle, your schema is, if you log in as a user, anything you build as a user belongs to your schema, as opposed to the database owner schema or anything like that. It's complicated, but it's kind of fun. Sometime I would love to take a summer off. I haven't had a summer off in 20 years. So.
Most jobs you don't get summers off.
I know, but that's supposed to be the benefit of teaching, right? I do get, and most people don't get, I mean, I get most of September off and half of August, so I mean, there's a fairly long gap there, which most people don't get. So. Yeah. What? Yeah. And if you actually go out and work, one reason I'm still at school probably, if you actually go out and do this stuff for a job, you probably don't get very many breaks at all. And even when you're on break, you're probably tied to your phone to some degree. I met a guy on the train today, weirdly. He worked at Adobe for a long time. Now he's working at Nordstrom's. I was just going to say, one of the things that comes up, and one of the things we do talk about in the summer, and then I'll let you guys work a while, is where are the jobs? All right. And it's hard, I will tell you, it is hard to get a job in database with a 2-year, you know, basically with a certificate. It helps to have some experience. It happens. There are people that do get jobs, and there are jobs out there. But one of the things you want to do is you don't necessarily want to look at Microsoft or Amazon, places like Nordstrom's, Costco. They have massive IT infrastructures, and they actually sometimes pay and treat you better.
You get a discount at the store.
I don't know if you get a discount. Costco, though, has quite often been listed as one of the best places to work.
Well, they pay their regular people a whole lot of money.
Yeah, they pay well. Partially, I think they don't have unions, but they pay well, partially to keep the unions out, probably. There are other places. I mean, almost everything that's bigger than a mom pop these days has some sort of IT infrastructure, and they need people, and database people are rare, so you probably have more of a chance going to someone, you know, if you go to Microsoft or Amazon, they have like their minimum requirements are 5 to 10 years, you know, experience. But if you go to a lot of these smaller companies, there are a lot of possibilities. Microsoft does hire people, even from this program. They're usually, the typical beginning job is either cleaning data, which is a pain, but can, you know, be okay, or running queries, analyzing data, but not on the data analytic level, but really just running queries against the data that they have to, you know, they'll give you a series of things they want you to look at. And so they do exist, those jobs. And some people have over here on Pill Hill or whatever they call it, all the hospitals.
First Hill.
First Hill, yeah. So there's a lot of medical jobs. The problem with those, and again, they're desperate for database people, is you tend to also have to understand the medical, right? So if you understand the medical terminology, if you understand that kind of thing, you can often find work over there. The big barrier is just the medical knowledge. And in general, if you've ever worked at something and you have a certain specialization at it, that'll give you an in, you know, so that they probably have database needs. And if you have that knowledge ahead of time, that it really helps to understand the data that you're working with, right? The principles of data in general are fairly abstract and generalizable, but you really, in order to ask intelligent questions in your queries and your reports, it really helps if you understand what the data is. So if you have any kind of specialized knowledge, you should use it when you go out and do this. So I'm going to give you the rest of time to work on this SubQueries and other things. How's your install going?
No. I had to, once I installed mine, I had to start it and restart it. I started properly the first time. It started properly. Oh, it keep running. It's not going.
I don't know. I don't think so. Close down there. Although you might be able to suspend and then come back with the numbers. That might be the option. If it's not.
If it's not done.
I think it will be. It's getting pretty close. Both of you may need to download the data to this.
Oh, the data from the Microsoft.
Yeah.
Microsoft.
It is Microsoft. It's pretty just yeah.
I had a question about. This is one of your queries. And you said that this was meaningless.
Right, because it's not matching. There's two different things.
Okay, so you get this, and that's.
So it looks like you got that data.
I probably won't know.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, that's a good
Okay, like here. Yeah. There's something like that.
Oh, you know what the problem is?
Oh.
You run too many or
This
one.
is, froze. And then I tried to shut it off.
Yeah. If they
I
don't.
couldn't shut it off. So I turned the power. And then when I turned it,
It looks like the two. Although is this yours?
yeah, that's. So that basically,
Yeah.
is it, when you have to fix it?
Turn on the
Yeah, I gotta go down there.
Is it here?
It's funny, how it sounds like I'm getting it.
This is for you got it up there.
Well, no. I have another friend
The reason I do
that's
this
sitting there.
is because that house.
Yeah.
That could happen here.
It's less likely that it could, but it's much less likely.
Hey, can I ask you one last question? I wasn't able to get, two people on this.
I could have done, I did post it.
The announcement.
And so that's the part I think is going to go.
As a student should come see this.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. I should, videos.
Oh.
I can post it, remind me of it.
You know, one time, we, there was this class that turned on as a.
Yeah, I know, so that's why I'm not sure. I don't. Yes, yeah.
So like,
They're almost all good. No, it's, so I will post it in one, but it hasn't stopped yet for this. I need to, I'm gonna stop that, and I'm gonna post the code.